Namaste. Good evening and welcome to another evening of Ramayana, the way of Rama. And yesterday we stopped at the point where Rama was getting ready to leave Ayodhya. Remember, he was banished for 14 years to the forest instead of becoming king, and instead of him becoming king, Bharata should be crowned king. His the youngest queen, Kaikeyi, had demanded. So Sita and Lakshman also decided that they wanted to come with Rama to the forest. And this is where the chapters start, called the banishment. Rama, Sita and Lakshman all gave worthy presents to their servants, as well as to the afflicted and to the poor. Then they proceeded to their father's palace to take leave of him. As the three of them walked through the streets, the people exclaimed in sympathy, "What dreadful misfortune has befallen our noble prince, that he should walk unescorted like this through the streets? Look at the princess, walking like an ordinary woman. How could the king banish a son like this? Strange are the ways of destiny." The citizens of Ayodhya were heartbroken to see the condition of their beloved prince. And they said, Let us also follow him into the forest, and let Kaikei and her son rule over a deserted land. Though he heard the citizens, Rama continued his journey to Kaikei's apartments to see his father. As Rama entered, the king rose and went forward to meet him, but he was so overcome with emotion that he collapsed. Rama and Lakshman ran forward and helped him to his couch. With folded palms, Rama said, "Kindly grant me permission to leave for the forest, O king, and kindly allow Sita and Lakshman to accompany me." They refuse to be left behind. "I will proceed to the forest and redeem your pledge." Urged by Kaikei, the afflicted king said with tears in his eyes, "I give you leave to proceed to the forest, my dear son. But remember, this promise has been extracted from me by Kaikei by a trick. I cannot bear to see you go. At least stay this night with me and your mother, so that we may delight in your presence for a few more hours before you depart." Rama was pained to hear this request of his father and said, "Neither kingship nor comfort can give me the joy which I gain by carrying out your wishes, and thus ensuring that you keep your word. Do not worry about us, dear father. We shall play with the deer in the forest and have the association of the sages and the saints. I have promised Kaikei that I shall leave this very day, and I must keep my word. Do not give way to grief, my lord. Let the land be given to Bharata. I bear him no ill will. Do not grieve on my account. I shall live in the forest as happily as I have lived in the city." The king now clasped his beloved son to his bosom and blessed him, crying all the while. As Rama backed out of the room, followed by Sita and Lakshman, Dasarath told Sumantra, his minister, "Drive the three of them to the forest." Kaikei now asked her maid to bring pieces of bark and presented a set to each of them. Rama immediately took off his silken clothing and donned the bark. Lakshman followed. Sita looked at the pieces of bark in her hands and didn't know what to do with them. She looked appealingly at her husband. Rama took the bark from her hands and tenderly fastened them over her cloth. All the ladies started to wail. Kausalya then clasped her daughter-in-law to her bosom and gave her words of advice. Requested by Sumantra, the three of them entered the chariot in which were kept the weapons of the two brothers. As the chariot started to move, the citizens clung to its sides, praising Rama and bewailing their lot. Rama told the charioteer to move faster. Looking back, he was most distressed to see that even the aged king and his mother were following the chariot along the dusty road. Though he was sorely grieved at the sight, he knew that it would be fatal to stop and turned back to comfort them. Even Rama's strong mind wavered at the sight of his mother, bereft and weeping, running after the chariot. Controlling his emotions, he ordered Sumantra to drive faster so that the painful scene would not be prolonged. He left behind a city in which life was frozen into immobility. The fires died down. No food was cooked that day in Ayodhya, for no one could eat. All shops remained shuttered and closed. Even the sun was obscured by clouds, so that it appeared as if darkness had fallen on the city soon after Rama had left. The city of Ayodhya appeared to be in deep mourning. Clouds of dust rose up in the streets, and citizens with sad, unhappy faces wandered about. They cursed Kaikeyi, who was the root cause of the problem. The next evening, the charioteer Sumantra returned to Ayodhya at dusk. Dasarath was anxiously waiting for information about Rama, but the only news which Sumantra could give him was that Rama had crossed the river at night and had asked him to return to town. He believed that Rama had proceeded to the forest of Chitrakoot. Both Kausalya and Dasarath were greatly agitated on hearing this news, and Dasarath related the story of how, in his youth, he had once killed a young ascetic in the forest who had been filling his pot with water in the river. Mistaking this gurgling sound for the sound of an elephant, he had killed the boy with his arrow. The parents of the boy were blind and had no one to help them, and when they heard of this act, they cursed the king, that he too would meet his death in agony of separation from his own son. Then they gave up their lives. After the grief-stricken king had told the entire episode to Kausalya and Sumitra, he fell into a swoon from which he never awoke. When the bards came to wake him up the next morning, they found him dead. The whole city was immobilized with grief. The sages urged Vashishta to send for Bharata and Shatrughna immediately and to install Bharata as king. For a land without a ruler would be an easy prey to invaders. Messengers were sent to the land of Kekeya to recall the princes. In the meantime, all the citizens who were able to follow had run after Rama's chariot, determined not to be left behind. Rama tried his best to persuade them to return, but they refused. So finally, they all reached the banks of the Tamasa River. Here, all of them spent the night. A bed of leaves was made for Rama and Sita, and here they slept, while Lakshman kept watch. Waking up well before dawn, Rama observed that the tired citizens were still fast asleep. He feared that they would keep urging him to return. So he called Sita and Lakshman and requested Sumantra to drive them to the forest before the others woke up. In the morning, the citizens were heartbroken to find Rama gone, and they sadly traced their way back to Ayodhya. Meanwhile, the chariot quickly arrived at the banks of the Ganga, where they were met by the Nishada chief, Guha, who was delighted to meet the young princess and Sita. The tribal chief did all he could to host the royal three. That night was spent on the banks of the sacred river. At dawn, Rama woke and requested Guha to take them across the river. He asked Sumantra to return to Ayodhya, for from there he preferred to proceed on foot. Reluctantly, with tears streaming from his reluctantly, I'm choking up, with tears streaming from his eyes, the noble Sumantra returned to Ayodhya. In the meantime, Goa had arranged a boat, and soon the three of them were rowed across the sacred river, Ganga. From there, they proceeded on foot, much to Sita's delight. The next day, they reached the ashram of sage Bharadvaj. Having spent the night at that delightful ashram, they proceeded the next day to the sacred hill of Chitrakoot, as directed by the sage. Rama said, "O Lakshman, please walk in front of the princess and clear a path for her so that her tender feet will not be hurt by the sharp stones and the thorns. I will come after and guard her from the rear. If you see any beautiful flowers or fruits, please pluck them for her." Rama pointed out to Sita the various interesting things to be seen. "Behold these trees, my love, heavy with fruits and nuts. This huge hive filled with honey, and all these delicious roots. We will never go hungry. Though you may not have the delicacies of the palace, you will feast on the abundance of nature. You shall sleep on a bed of fragrant grass and flowers, and have the nightingale to sing a lullaby for you." The party soon reached the holy mountain of Chitrakoot. Rama requested Lakshman to build a hut, for he felt that this was the right place for them to live. Lakshman made a beautiful cottage for them, and for 3 months they lived comfortably and happily at this charming place. While the three were in the forest, the messengers sent by Vashishta brought back the 2 princes, Bharata and Shatrughna. As they entered the city of Ayodhya, they were very surprised to see the gloomy looks of the citizens. They first went to the king's apartments, and not finding him there, Bharata then went to his mother's abode. Kaikeyi rejoiced to see her handsome son. When questioned by him about the sorrowful looks of the citizens and the absence of his father, she told him the entire story and waited for his look of joy at the thought that he would soon be installed as king. Bharata couldn't believe his ears. He was amazed to see how little his mother knew him. "Surely my eldest brother Rama should be king, and not me," he exclaimed. Now Kaikeyi told him the whole story of the king's promise in Rama's exile. She waited expectantly for her son's words of appreciation at his mother's cleverness. She was shocked at his reaction. He jumped back as if stung by a wasp and exclaimed in horror, "Can you really expect me to rejoice at this news? Do you imagine that I will seize the throne for myself and rejoice at my good fortune? Oh, wicked woman, I cannot bear to call you mother. It was my misfortune to have been born in your womb. What possessed you to act in this insane fashion?" The next day, Sage Vashista requested Bharata to come to the court and urged him to accept the kingdom. Bharata refused the offer and said that he had decided to go to the forest to try and persuade his brother to return and take up his rightful heritage. When this news leaked out, the whole city decided to accompany him. A whole parade of elephants, horses and chariots, soldiers, and even the three queens set out happily, determined to persuade Rama to return. When they reached the banks of the Ganga, the Nishada chief, Guha, met them first. From there, they went to the ashram of sage Bharadwaj, who informed them of Rama's whereabouts. The sage, with his extraordinary powers or cities, proceeded to feed the entire army, much to the amazement of all. The next morning, the whole entourage proceeded to Chitrakoot. Rama had been sitting outside the ashram with Sita. When he realized that the whole woodland was in an uproar, there was a cloud of dust that could be seen rising in the distance. He asked Lakshman to climb a tree and find out the cause of this disturbance. Lakshman was horrified to see the approaching army with Bharata at its head and decided that Bharata had followed them with the intention of killing Rama. He swore that he would kill him before they dared to approach. But Rama pacified his brother, and then they awaited Bharata's coming. Bharata's eyes were so full of tears at the sight of his brother with matted locks and bark clothing that he stumbled and would have fallen had not Rama run forwards and caught him in a tight embrace. Seating Bharata next to him, Rama tenderly inquired about the welfare of his father and others. He was greatly upset to hear of his father's death. Bharata begged Rama to return, but Rama advised him to do his duty, as he himself had done, and to return to Ayodhya and rule for 14 years till his return. Bharata tried many methods to persuade Rama to come back. At last he was reconciled to the fact that he would have to play the role of Prince Regent, for that appeared to be the only way that he could serve his beloved brother. Bharata then took out a pair of polished wooden sandals. These he put before Rama and requested him to kindly place his feet on them. He swore that he could never ascend the throne of his father, which rightfully belonged to his brother. But would place the sandals on the throne and be only an instrument for carrying out the orders of his brother. He also swore that as long as his brother lived in the forest, he himself would also live outside the city, wearing the bark of trees with matted locks and subsisting only on fruits and roots, as his brothers were also doing. This he would do for 14 years. Rama embraced his noble brother and tenderly stroked his head, as Bharata sobbed on his shoulder. He blessed him and told him that he would certainly return the moment the 14 years were over and take up the reins of government. He then placed his holy feet on the sandals and stood for a few minutes in contemplation, and then removed them and gave them to his brother. Bharata placed the footwear on his head. Then he walked away while Rama bade farewell to his mothers, for he could not bear to see them weep. The royal party returned to Ayodhya. Bharata decided to take up his residence at the village of Nandigram, a few miles away from Ayodhya. The golden throne of the kings was brought to Nandigram, and he placed the wooden sandals on the throne and bowed low before them. He said to his ministers, "The kingdom will be ruled by me as a sacred trust till my brother returns. These sandals will rule, and not me. Until I see Rama's royal feet placed once more on them, I will live like an ascetic." For the next 14 years, Bharata lived a hermit's life. Every day the ministers came from Ayodhya, and they would also bow low to the sandals, as they would before the king, and all matters of state would be discussed before them. For 14 years there was no sound of music in Ayodhya. All the people walked, since Rama had to go on foot. At Chitrakoot, an aura of gloom covered the ashram after Bharata left. The tear-stained eyes of his brother haunted Rama. None of the three could forget the painful episodes connected with Bharata's visit. The cottage, which had once been a scene of joy, was now filled with sorrow. Sita and the two brothers decided to leave, and they proceeded to the well-known ashram of sage Atri and his wife Anasuya. They spent the night at the ashram. In the morning, Atri asked Rama to go to the Dandaka forest. He said that the forest was infested with rakshasas, demons, who delighted in harassing the rishis. He asked him to go there and protect the sages from the torments of these cannibals, and allow them to continue their life of simplicity and renunciation. Rama willingly agreed to this, and the three exiles entered the dark and forbidding forest called Dandaka. And this is where we enter the third book, Aranya Kanda, the book of the forest. Though the forest looked dark and gloomy from the outside, as they went into it, they were amazed to find that it was filled with ashrams in which many sages lived. The pleasant scent of sandalwood and incense coming from the sacrificial fires entered their nostrils. There were lakes and flowers in plenty, and the trees were laden with fruits and nuts. They proceeded cautiously, with Lakshman in front and Sita clinging to Rama coming after him. Rama took Sita's hand in his so that she would not be frightened. They arrived at the ashram of sage Sharabanga. All the rishis living in the neighborhood came to Rama there. They showed him a heap of bleached bones and told him that it belonged to the hermits who had been killed and eaten by the Rakshasas. They begged him to rescue them from the constant threat of these creatures. Rama gave his assurance that he would kill the Rakshasas and enable them to perform their austerities in peace. The three of them decided to continue onward. They penetrated deeper into the dark forest. As they walked on, Sita spoke gently to her husband. "My lord," she said, "for a long time I have been wondering about the meaning of the word Dharma. It is not always easy to know what one's Dharma is. I'm frightened, my lord, of the possible consequences of your promise to the sages, to protect them from the Rakshasas. They have done you no wrong, yet you are prepared to kill them. Is this not against the dictates of Dharma? I don't think we should go further into this forest." Poor Sita. Little did she realize that what she spoke was the truth, and she herself was going to be victimized for Rama's killing of the Rakshasas. Rama was pleased to hear this discourse on Dharma by his dutiful wife. He replied lovingly to her, "O Janaki, you are the daughter of Janaka, one of the wisest men of the age. It is not surprising, therefore, that you should know Dharma. But consider the predicament of these sages, my love. They have abandoned all worldly pleasures only for the sake of tapas. By their tapas, the country itself gets purified. All negativity will be cleared. At present, they are unable to perform their austerities due to the harassment of the Rakshasas. They have begged me to save them, and since I am their king, don't you think it is my duty to protect them? Even if they had not requested it of me, it would have been my duty to do so. Now, of course, after having given my word, I cannot dream of breaking it. I know well that it is only your concern for me that made you speak as you did, and I thank you for it. But My dear, I cannot stand by and see these poor ascetics being eaten by these cannibals. Thus saying, Rama walked ahead with Janaki following and Lakshman in the rear. Thus the months and the years passed in happy companionship as the three of them wandered in the forest of Dandaka, going from ashram to ashram. Everywhere they were welcomed with delight, for Rama's fame had spread to all the far corners, and everyone longed for a chance to see him and offer them hospitality. At some places they stayed for 6 months, at others a few days, and sometimes even a year. Sita forgot her fear and wandered happily behind her husband. She would pick a twig here and a leaf there and put a flower into her hair. She would peer curiously into the nest of a small bird and run after the deer. The beauties of nature were always a delight to her, and she did not mind the hardships which such a life could naturally bring. Nor did she miss the sophistication of palace life. To her, nothing was as wonderful as walking hand in hand with her beloved, lying in the sun and lying in the sun on the mountain tops with him beside her, allowing him to place a flower garland in her hair, or just sitting beside him, listening to his voice. Lakshman derived maximum joy from serving the two of them. 12 years thus flew by without any of them feeling the weight of them. It was in the 13th year of their exile that they crossed the Vindhya hills and walked down the southern slopes. And here they come at a place called Panchavati. The three of them soon came to a beautiful grove known as Panchavati. On the way, they noticed an enormous eagle. The bird was greatly excited at seeing them and introduced himself as Jatayu. He said he had been a friend of Dasarat. He said that he had a brother called Sampati, whom he had not seen for many, many years. Jatayu promised to live with them and guard them and give warning at the approach of Rakshasas and wild animals. Rama was delighted to hear this. Panchavati was a wonderful place, surrounded by mountain peaks and filled with fruit-laden trees and flowers. The sound of the river Godavari close by and the gurgle of its stream were delightful to the ears. Having chosen a spot close to the stream with 5 flowering trees, Rama requested Lakshman to build a small cottage for them. Lakshman then built a beautiful cottage and with twigs and wattle and a grass roof and invited Rama and Sita to enter. They were charmed with the place. He had made separate partitions for eating, sleeping and puja. Everything was made to look fresh and beautiful with an eye to utility as well as aesthetics. Rama laughingly asked him, "Where did you learn the art of construction?" "I can't remember ever having learned anything like that from our guru." Lakshman answered, "When love fills the heart, there is no task which is difficult. The magic of love overcomes all difficulties and gives all knowledge." Rama's eyes filled with tears as he embraced him and said, "My dearest brother, how can I ever repay you for the loving service you have rendered to me all these years? My life during this exile would have been unbearable but for your constant care and attention." The three of them spent a long time in that beautiful spot. They would talk of their past life in the palace, which felt as if it was a dream. The three of them spent many blissful days at Panchavati. Sita spent the happiest years of her life there. She would roam through the forest with Rama, clutching his hand, while he plucked flowers for her. She would sit still while he braided her hair and twined it with blossoms. At night, they would lie close to each other on the hilltops, watching the stars above. Sometimes, if a stream was too deep, he would carry her in his arms, and when they reached the other bank, she would refuse to get down, and he would pretend to throw her into the sky, and she would laugh and nestle closer to him. She was in a blissful dream all the time, and Rama too found great happiness in the beauty of nature, as well as the beauty of his charming bride and the companionship of his brother. Little did they realize that the time was coming close for the purpose of his avatar to be fulfilled, and the reason for his exile to be completed. I think we can do one more. One day, when the three of them had finished puja and eaten their simple meal, they sat outside in the shade of a beautiful champaka tree. At that time, a Rakshasi called Surpaneka, the sister of the demon king Ravana, happened to be passing by, and she spied the two extraordinarily handsome men sitting under the tree. She was fascinated by the beauty of Rama's body. She gazed and gazed at him with delight. She could not bear to tear her eyes away from him, even though he didn't notice her and seemed to be engrossed in talking to the girl beside him. Supaneka decided that this was the man for her. The Rakshasas were a race of cannibals, and their morals were barbarous. What they desired, they took, regardless of the consequences. It didn't even cross her mind that he might find her offensive. She was enormous, with flaming red hair and small, cruel eyes. She had yellow, horny skin. She had just killed and eaten a rabbit, and blood was dripping from her fangs. She went towards Rama. She didn't care about the fact that he was sitting with another woman who might well have been his wife. She was determined to have him, and she spoke in a harsh voice. "Who are you, O handsome one? How did you happen to come here?" Rama replied politely, "I am Rama, the son of King Dasarath. That is my brother Lakshman, who is sitting there, and this is my wife Sita. Now tell me who you are, and what I can do for you." She replied, "I am a Rakshasi called Surpaneka, and I am the sister of Ravana. I happened to be passing by and saw you and fell in love with you. You are a fitting mate for me. Look at this little creature beside you. She is certainly not worthy of you. I will gobble her up, and your brother too, and we will roam around happily in this beautiful forest." Sita shuddered and crept closer to her husband. He put his arm reassuringly around her and laughed. He really couldn't believe that this woman was actually soliciting him in broad daylight, in front of his wife and brother. He was sure it was a joke. Laughingly he said, "My dear lady, I'm quite honored by your offer, but you must understand that I'm a married man. I happen to love my wife very much, even though it might surprise you. Look over there at my younger brother, who is fair and handsome. Why not approach him?" Supaneka thought this over and decided that he spoke the truth. So she approached Lakshman and asked him in the same way to be her husband. Lakshman was also amused by her and decided to keep up the joke. He replied, "My dear lady, I'm only a servant of Rama. How can you be happy with a servant?" Surpaneka returned to Rama now and said, "I see that you are not interested in me only because this ugly woman is sitting beside you. I'll eat her, and thus you can be rid of her, and we will be able to be together." She turned her eyes on the trembling Sita and rushed towards her. Sita screamed and clung to Rama. He stood up and put her behind him and spoke to Lakshman. "Look how frightened my Sita is. Please punish this woman and send her away, O Lakshman. We will not kill her, since she is a woman, but we should teach her a lesson, so that she will go away and leave us in peace." Lakshman immediately took his sword and sliced off the tip of Surpaneka's nose and ears. Roaring with rage and pain and swearing revenge, she ran off into the forest. The ground shook with the weight of her steps, and the birds flew off with shrill cries of fear. She ran to the Rakshasa settlement called Janastana, where her cousin Kara lived, and poured out her whole story. Kara then swore to take revenge and called 14 of his best soldiers to go and put an end to the intruders who had dared to harm his sister. Surpaneka then led them to the ashram. When they arrived, Rama turned to Lakshman and said, "It looks as if we are in for a bit of fighting. Guard Sita while I go and finish them off." So saying, he went towards them and killed them in no time, as he had promised to do. Surpaneka couldn't believe her eyes. She had never seen human beings who could stand up to even one Rakshasa, let alone 14. She ran back and stood howling before Kara. "What's upsetting you now?" he inquired. "I have sent my men as I promised." Surpaneka said, "Your men are all lying in a lake of blood, killed by Rama, single-handed." Kara was amazed by this and ordered 14,000 warriors to fight this man. Far away in the ashram, Rama heard the roaring sound of the approaching army, coming like a tidal wave. Rama strung his bow and prepared himself for battle. Rama stood like a rock and fought calmly, ably resisting the attack. His arrows, charged with mantras, were so painful that the first onslaught of Rakshasas turned tail and ran back, screaming with agony. Again and again, Kara sent his warriors, only to be killed by Rama's deadly arrows. Blind with rage, Kara rushed towards Rama. Rama invoked the power of Indra into his arrow and sent it at Kara. It entered his chest and Kara fell down dead. Seeing their leader fall, the rest of the Rakshasa army, including Surpaneka, fled in terror. Lakshman now returned with Sita. Sita rushed towards Rama and embraced him. She was so happy to see him alive. Though proud of her husband, she had some foreboding that this was not the end of the affair and that their peaceful days were over. So far for the reading of the Ramayana tonight, and tomorrow evening I will continue. I'm gonna finish with the song, the bhajan, Raghupati. Pati Raghava Raja Ram Patita Pavana Sitaram Patita Pavana Sitaram. So again, I would like to see you, or not see you maybe, but you see and hear me hopefully tomorrow evening again at 9 o'clock. And don't forget that you can, of course, also order a copy for yourself to read at home. It is called The Song of Rama, or Rama Lila, the Play of Rama, by Vana Mali. And I want to finish or end tonight with the following prayer. May all be healthy. May all be at peace with each other. May all be fulfilled. May all be auspicious. Let all be happy. Let all be free from pain. Let all see reality everywhere. Let none have sorrow. Om Tat Sat. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram.